have you back. If you're just joining us, you're watching the news at 10 live on Channels Television. A reminder of our major stories. President Muhammadu Buhari thanks Nigerians for their patience in enjoying the current fuel scarcity, orders operators in the oil and gas industry to end hoarding and price inflation by marketers. The Group Managing Director of the NNPC, Mekanti Baru, says price of petrol remains 145 naira per litre in spite of a higher landing cost for the product. Nigerians continue to bear the brunt of the long queues at petrol stations across the country. And a Christmas service takes place in the Iraqi city of Mosul for the first time since members of ISIS were driven out of the region. For more on our top stories and others, please visit our website. It's channelstv.com and on youtube.com/channelsweb. Log on to m.channelstv.com to watch us on your mobile device or download the Channels TV app for Android, iOS and Windows devices from their respective stores. And there's also something else you can do. The Channels TV and Channels 24 app will give you access to news and updates. You also have the Eyewitness feature with which you can share those pictures, videos or news of happenings around you. Just install the app, then tap and swipe to reveal the menu and follow the instructions. And we have some of the pictures you've sent into our Eyewitness portal today. It really shows that the fuel scarcity is biting harder. From our pictures, it clearly shows that, beginning with this one from Jos, the Plateau State capital, showing this scene, which our Eyewitness reporter says is a convoy of the state governor buying fuel at a black market. And still on the fuel scarcity, we have this image from a filling station, which our Eyewitness reporter says is opposite the force headquarters in Abuja, the federal capital city, is showing a queue of vehicles waiting to buy the product. Our next image is from Ilorin, the Kwara State capital, is showing stranded motorcyclists and some cars waiting to get fuel. The situation is not any better in Magboro, Ogun State, where our Eyewitness reporter says that shows us this long queue of vehicles also waiting to buy petrol, and they are all appealing to the government to do something about this, and quickly too. And our next image is showing this family already in the Christmas mood. Some smiles there. Our Eyewitness who sent this image from Akure, the Ondo State capital, is wishing everyone a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Our final image is from the United States, also showing another family in the Christmas spirit, enjoying the festivities. Our Eyewitness reporter is wishing everyone a Merry Christmas. For analysts, 2017 is a mixed bag of highs and lows for the National Assembly. While some commend the lawmakers for their prompt response to national issues and the passage of the critical legislation to address the recession, they fault them for their lackluster oversight of government ministries, departments and agencies in 2016. Our correspondent Linda Akigwe tells us more.
One of the highlights of the 8th National Assembly in 2017 is the sheer number of investigations conducted by the Senate and the House of Representatives. Nigerians will not forget in a hurry the scandal involving the sacked secretary to the government of the Federation, Babachir Lawal, over corruption allegations. In 2017 alone, the Senate conducted 17 ongoing investigative hearings. Notable ones among them are investigation of the various allegations leveled against the Inspector General of Police, the reappearance and reinstatement of the former chairman of the Presidential Task Force on Pension Reform, Abdurrashid Mina, humanitarian relief efforts in the Northeast, the standoff between the EFCC, NIA and DSS over the arrest of ex-NIA and DSS bosses, In the House of Representatives, some of the notable investigations include the promotion and reinstatement of Abdurrashid Mina, the Centenary City Project, the National Health Insurance Scheme, U.S. sex allegations against 3 lawmakers, and modern slavery and the death of 26 Nigerian women in Italy.
This House has again marked itself out in the area of oversighting, investigation, and Section 88 and 89 of the Constitution empowers the National Assembly to conduct investigations and all of that. And we've taken that very, this House, the 8th Assembly, has taken that very seriously. It happened last year, 2015, and it has continued this year.
But the executive director of an online parliamentary magazine maintains that these investigations carried out by the parliament would not have been necessary in the first place.
Investigations are necessarily, they are okay, but the committee system needs to be re-evaluated to be sure that we do not need to do popularism. We do not need to ride on public sentiments, get citizens excited, or some money is missing somewhere, so we're investigating. Also, what happened to the committee in charge of that sector? Have they been doing their job? It raises questions, and if we want to be honest, perhaps, we should, this is a time to say, look, enough of all of this drama. Let committees do their job.
In 2017, the Senate and the House of Representatives passed nearly 60 bills. Some of these economic bills include Secure Transactions in Movable Assets Bill, Credit Reporting Bill, Ports and Harbour Reform Bill, Nigeria Railway Bill, Commercial Agri-Credit Guarantee Scheme, and Independent Warehouse Regulatory Bill.
The number of bills passed by the 8th Senate was 38. Then the number of bills passed by the 8th Senate in form of concurrence from the House of Representatives was 41.
The body of laws that they've reviewed about 54 anachronistic laws that they reviewed, of course, with the help of the development partners and private sector, to identify those laws that have outlived their usefulness, and then collapse them into 15 major economic reform bills. Now, that's very important. Some of them are electronic. In fact, some of them are bringing us to the frontiers of practice and international best practice.
2017 was also a year that finally saw the National Assembly open up its budget for scrutiny. Civil rights analysts also say the National Assembly was not alive to its responsibilities in the areas of budgeting and passing some critical legislation.
What worries me the most is the lack of sensitivity of the issue of budget and the economy and how it affects the recession. I don't think the National Assembly sees it in that critical sense.
In 2017, the legislature once again locked heads with the executive, and this worsened an already fragile relationship between the two arms of government. The Senate refused to confirm the nomination of Ibrahim Magu as the EFCC chairman. Till date, President Buhari has refused to name a new EFCC chairman, leaving Ibrahim Magu as the acting chairman.
2 different reports.
In 2017, the National Assembly again failed to pass the Petroleum Industry Bill, a key legislation intended to establish guidelines for the operation of the petroleum sector. Going into 2018, keen observers of Parliament want to see the National Assembly pass key legislations such as the PIB, conduct more electoral reforms ahead of the 2019 general elections, and also ensure that investigations they will conduct add value to the lives of Nigerians. Linda Akibi, Channels Television News.
To discuss more about this, we're being joined on the news at 10 by the Executive Director of the Policy and Legal Advocacy Center, Mr. Clement Wankwo. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Now, how would you assess the National Assembly in 2017 in terms of its critical role of lawmaking, oversight and representation?
Lawmaking, I think that when you look at the National Assembly and from the report that has just been put out, there has been some good progress with some of the laws that have been passed. Of course, critical laws remain unpassed, and the report by your correspondent there talks about the petroleum industry bill, which has been the most outstanding bill that hasn't been passed by the National Assembly, and it's been in the Assembly for almost 12 years. The reforms that citizens expect with the Electoral Act and constitutional reform have been pending. Clearly, of course, the constitution reform bills have passed, and some of them are awaiting voting in the states. We're still waiting to see what happens with the Electoral Act, but these are bills that should have been passed. But I must point out that when you look at lawmaking, the question you need to ask is how many bills have the executive put into the National Assembly? When you look at the fact that several of the bills that the National Assembly have been dealing with have been member bills, you really ask yourself, who should set the legislative agenda for a government? Certainly, the executive has that responsibility to reform laws, to set a legislative agenda for the government, and this has not happened. This has been the major crisis with respect to passage of laws. Most of the laws have been individual member bills. They have had issues respecting even the quality of the bills, but certainly the executive has not taken any initiative in reforming the laws in the country or even using laws to bring about development or reform, and that has been the major problem. With respect to representation, I think there are several issues that come into play here. When you ask yourself the question whether members in the Senate or in the House are adequately representing their constituents, I think a lot of constituents would have questions whether this has been the case. And with respect to oversight, I think that there has been a major issue as well. When the National Assembly carries out, for instance, an investigative oversight, the expectation is that when they make findings, that the executive will take this very seriously. But clearly, it looks like even when an administration talks about fighting corruption, and the National Assembly does carry out investigative hearings that exposes corruption, the executive is reluctant to take any action. Indeed, it looks like the executive sees itself as being protective of the allegations of corruption from which the National Assembly makes recommendations. Expecting the executive to take action has been a very difficult one. And I think for a lot of Nigerians who are watching the National Assembly, there might be criticisms of the National Assembly, but certainly you do have an executive that has no legislative agenda, that has no legislative direction, and has not used the instrument of legislation to bring about development. And I think that this is really sad for Nigeria and sad for government in this country.
Mr. Nwankwo, you said it yourself, the 8th Assembly has conducted some high-profile investigations this year. So what's really the value of these investigations if the executive chooses not to implement it?
Well, it's an indictment on the executive. The legislature can only do what it can, which is to really investigate these issues. You'd expect that when the legislature makes findings, that the executive would be interested in the outcome of those findings. Some of those findings it should examine to see whether it requires even more law enforcement investigation and prosecution where allegations of corruption show up and the legislature makes findings. You'll expect that the executive will take action to plug the loopholes that the legislature has identified. We have not seen this, and this is not new. This was the case in the previous administration. This continues, and perhaps even worse with this administration. So I think really the big problem is an executive that is lethargic, that is unconcerned about government in the way that should produce the nature of development that this country needs. So while we do have some issues with the challenges that the legislature faces and some of its own failings even, I think the greater blame should go to the executive that has no idea what to do with a legislature that is really even willing to work with it to deal with some of the challenges of development that this country faces.
Mr. Clement Nwankwo, thank you so much for speaking with us. He's been speaking with us live from our studios in Abuja, and he's the Executive Director, Policy and Legal Advocacy Center. Many thanks. When the news at 10 returns, our community report tonight looks at the plight of residents of Kaduna who have been without power supply for over 6 months. That's after the break. Stay with us.